MP-18 in Afghanistan, May 7th, 2019. This is a rather old discovery, but it was still interesting enough to make a video on. Way back in May of 2019, the Afghan National Army, which then was supported by the US, had discovered a large number of weapons in the hands of various Taliban and Islamic State of Khorasan members, or ISIS-K members, in the province of Nangarhar. Nangarhar province is located on the border with Pakistan. In May of 2019, several dozen Taliban and at least 35 Islamic State of Khorasan fighters decided to surrender to the Afghan security forces at the time, controlled or funded by the United States. They brought with them all of the weapons they had stashed away, and all of the weapons were confiscated. One of the weapons that were confiscated during the searches was a World War I vintage MP-18 Schmeisser submachine gun, which was developed by Hugo Schmeisser between 1916 and 1918, entering service in early 1918 and being used towards the very end of World War I in the hands of German stormtroopers. Later on, the MP-18 was later used by the Army of the Weimar Republic, and some MP-18s were still in service during the Second World War in the hands of German Wehrmacht and Waffen-SS soldiers. The MP-18 was exported to a number of nations during the interwar years and during the Second World War. Now, how an MP-18 ended up in Afghanistan is a strange mystery. It could have come from a variety of sources. One way it could have gotten there was via the Weimar Republic. The Weimar Republic and later on the Third Reich, or the Nazi government of Germany, both sold weapons to the Afghan government at the time. This is back when Afghanistan was known as the Kingdom of Afghanistan. So it could have come there via either the Weimar Germany or via the National Socialist government. It also could have been sold by the Soviet Union. During the Second World War, the Soviet Union captured millions upon millions of German weapons at the end of the Second World War. Many of those weapons were later sold to the Kingdom of Afghanistan. So it could have been sold as part of a batch of weapons by the USSR to the Kingdom of Afghanistan in the post-war era of the 1950s and 60s. A third way it could have gotten there is via China. China also manufactured copies of both the MP-18 and the MP-28 submachine guns in the 1920s and 30s, during the time in which China was run by the Chinese nationalist government, also known as the Kuomintang or KMT. Both the MP-18 and MP-28s were also used in the Chinese Civil War and the Second Sino-Japanese War. So the weapon could have been sold by the Chinese to the Kingdom of Afghanistan, maybe in the 1920s or 30s, or maybe during the post-Civil War era in the 1950s. The fourth and final way it could have gotten there is via Pakistan or India, which were part of the British Empire back in those days. The British had confiscated a number of MP-18s at the end of World War I, and even more MP-18s during the Second World War, along with many other MP-28 submachine guns, which were just the modified version of the MP-18. So those are some of the ways this MP-18 could have ended up in Afghanistan. Either way, the submachine gun, the MP-18 that was discovered by the Afghan Army at the time, was pretty badly worn out. It was badly corroded, and it seemed like the spring or the firing spring was either sticking out of the weapon or was damaged altogether. The weapon seems to have either been taped or wrapped with some kind of tape or cord-like contraption in the rear of the gun, meaning that the gun probably is missing some screws or bolts. But either way, the fact that an MP-18 from World War I was in the hands of either Taliban members or Islamic State of Khorasan or ISIS-K fighters shows that the MP-18 was still being used, at least on the battlefield of Afghanistan, as late as 2019. So far, this is the only MP-18 to show up in Afghanistan. And in Pakistan, a few years ago, an MP-28 also appeared in the hands of a Pakistani Taliban fighter. Several MP-28s, MP-18s, and MP-34s were captured by Brazilian police between 2009 and 2015. So dozens of these old World War I and interwar era submachine guns that were either the MP-18 itself or derivatives of the MP-18 were still being used in the late 2010s. So what do you all think of this discovery? A rare World War I vintage MP-18 in Afghanistan? Please tell me in the comment section below, and until next time, this was J-Man Time signing off.